Tonight, student protests. Bangladesh police deploy tear gas amid protests. Internet curbs imposed amid clashes, leaving 6 dead, hundreds injured. UK summit. PM Stamal leads EPC summit, urges border security action, while Royals hosts leaders for key talks on asylum backlog and more. Biden positive. President Biden tests positive for COVID-19, self-isolates in Delaware amid calls to halt re-election bid. Rare photos. Uncontacted Mashkopiro tribe emerges in Peruvian Amazon amid rising logging threat, documented by Survival International. All that and more as World News Tonight starts right now.
This is Derana World News Tonight. Reporting from Colombo, here is Sanuvi Mudanayaka.
Good evening and thanks for tuning in this Thursday night onto another edition of World News Tonight. There's a lot to cover this evening and we begin with the ongoing situation that is unfolding in neighbouring Bangladesh. Police fired tear gas to scattered protesters in Bangladesh, while authorities cut some mobile internet services as violent clashes showed no signs of slowing. Despite a nationwide shutdown called by students demanding a 30% quota abolition, Dhaka saw open shops and offices with reduced bus services.
Police fired tear gas to disperse stone-throwing students in Chittagong, halting mobile services nationwide due to social media rumors, according to the junior IT minister. The protest, fueled by high youth unemployment and opposition to a 30% quota for freedom fighters' families, pose a significant challenge to Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's government. Clashes spread across Dhaka and other cities, prompting the closure of universities and deployment of riot police. Hasina promised a judicial inquiry into protester deaths, with a Supreme Court hearing set for the 7th of August on the quota issue. International bodies have called for Bangladesh to protect peaceful demonstrators.
Heading over to Europe, European leaders gathered at an English country mansion for a summit marked by apprehension over the future reliability of the US should Trump secure a second presidency. Discussions at the summit are set to center on strategic planning to navigate the uncertainties in transatlantic relations.
Sir Keir Starmer will host a summit with around 45 European leaders aiming to reset Britain's relationship with Europe. The European Political Community gathering will focus on supporting Ukraine, addressing migration and energy concerns, and enhancing UK's global role. Starmer plans a more active diplomatic role, emphasizing issues from tackling people smuggling to confronting Russian aggression. The summit, pivotal amid key political shifts, includes meeting with key leaders like Zelensky, focusing on Ukraine and potential new security pacts with the EU. Originally scheduled by former PM Rishi Sunak, the summit now takes place under Starmer's leadership at Blenheim Palace, Winston Churchill's birthplace.
It's been 10 years since Malaysia Airlines flight MH17 was shot down by pro-Russian separatists over eastern Ukraine in 2014, killing all 298 passengers and crew on board. But a decade later, the families and victims are still grappling with unimaginable grief, slowly trying to rebuild their scattered lives in the harrowing aftermath.
Relatives of the 298 passengers and crew killed when Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 was shot down over Ukraine gathered in Australia and the Netherlands to mark the tragedy's 10th anniversary. The Dutch king, politicians and diplomats joined hundreds of family members at a memorial near Schiphol Airport, where the flight departed on the 17th of July 2014. The Dutch Foreign Ministry reiterated its resolve to seek truth, justice and accountability. Australian Attorney General Mark Dreyfus joined the commemoration, where 298 trees and sunflowers, symbolic of the crash site, were planted. As conflict in Ukraine continues, families urge Russia to accept the blame, while international efforts to hold Russia accountable persist.
Moving over to East Asia, China has decided to hold talks with the United States over arms control and non-proliferation, citing Washington's engagement in arms sales with Taiwan. Such remarks came from China's Foreign Ministry spokesman Liang Jiang during a regular briefing yesterday.
China has suspended arms control talk with the US, citing US actions as the cause. Chinese spokesperson Lin Jian blamed the US for undermining the political atmosphere needed for such consultations. The US has continued arms sales to Taiwan, which China opposes. According to Lin, these actions have damaged mutual trust. China is open to dialogue based on mutual respect and cooperation. However, the US must respect China's core interest for talks to resume. Previous consultations were held in Washington, D.C. in November of 2023.
Staying in the region, Selina Cheung, newly appointed chair of the Hong Kong Journalists Association, was terminated by the Wall Street Journal. Cheung expressed dismay, noting her dismissal was due to assuming the union role.
The newly elected head of the Hong Kong Journalists Association stood before a throng of reporters on Wednesday to say she had been fired from her job at the Wall Street Journal after she refused demands from her boss at the paper to not run for the leadership post and to not advocate for media freedoms.
At that time, he demanded that I resign from my position on the executive committee of the Journalists Association. I told him that day that I refused, but he said the position in the Journalists Association was incompatible with my position at the Wall Street Journal. He said that employees of the Wall Street Journal should not be promoting press freedom in places like Hong Kong. He said this place is not like some Western countries where press freedom has already been established.
Selina Cheung, who covered China's automobile sector for the Journal, was elected in June to be the trade union's new chairperson at a time of mounting pressure by authorities under a national security crackdown that has seen reporters arrested and liberal media outlets closed. The Hong Kong Journalists Association said in a statement that by pressuring employees not to take part in the trade union, the journal risks hastening the decline of what space for independent journalism remains.
Let's take a short commercial break. More world news on the other side. Tonight on the road to the White House announced that President Joe Biden tested positive for COVID-19 while visiting Las Vegas and is self-isolating with mild symptoms. The 81-year-old Democrat, under pressure from his party to reconsider his re-election bid, cancelled a speech due to the diagnosis.
Overnight, President Biden landing in Delaware after testing positive for COVID, being helped into the SUV before putting on a mask. Earlier in Nevada, the president not wearing a mask, saying, "I'm good," and giving a thumbs up as he slowly boarded Air Force One. The COVID diagnosis comes as questions mount over the president's ability to serve another 4 years. In an interview this week, the president said the only thing that would make him reevaluate staying in the race.
If there had some medical condition that emerged, if the doctors came to me and said, "You got this problem, that problem."
Pressure may be growing from the most powerful Democrats on Capitol Hill, among them former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Citing multiple sources, Pelosi privately told President Biden polling shows he cannot defeat Donald Trump, and that the president could destroy Democrats' chances of winning the House in November. A Pelosi spokesperson would only confirm she has not spoken to President Biden since Friday. Meanwhile, in a meeting with the president Saturday, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer also shared recent polling data showing Biden trailing Trump in what two sources familiar with the meeting called a blunt conversation. Schumer's office saying Leader Schumer conveyed the views of his caucus directly to President Biden. But just 2 days after that meeting with Schumer, the president staying the course.
Look, 14 million people voted for me to be the nominee in the Democratic Party. Okay? I listen to them.
While President Biden is increasingly irritated with his critics, his discussions with aides has also shifted to be mindful of the damage to his legacy, according to two close allies. Before the COVID diagnosis, there's a sense among some aides that there could be, quote, a willingness to reassess if a major development shook up the race. Some Republicans have said they want President Biden as an opponent, but former President Trump's team says he's ready for anything.
Is Joe Biden your preferred opponent? We really don't care, Savannah, whether it's Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, or another candidate. We are prepared to deliver Donald Trump a victory on November 5th.
New details emerged about the moments before a gunman opened fire at a Trump campaign rally in Pennsylvania, injuring the former president, killing another man and wounding 2 others. In an FBI and Secret Service briefing with senators, officials also said the shooter visited the rally site several days in advance of Trump's appearance.
In an FBI and Secret Service briefing with members of the Senate, troubling revelations about the hour before a 20-year-old gunman opened fire on former President Donald Trump. Senators learned that he was identified as being suspicious and photographed more than an hour before the shooting. According to multiple sources familiar with the briefing, a detailed timeline was shared with senators. At 5:51 p.m., Pennsylvania State Police notified Secret Service of a suspicious person with a rangefinder. 5:53, the Secret Service notified its snipers. At 6:02, Trump takes the stage. At 6:09, people in the crowd saw Thomas Crooks on the rooftop and shouted to law enforcement. And 2 minutes later, shots are fired. Senator Ron Johnson reacting to the briefing at the Republican convention in Wisconsin today.
Congress has got to do detailed and intensive oversight, leave no stone unturned, no question unasked or unanswered.
Senators also learned the shooter visited the rally site several days in advance of Trump's appearance to scope it out.
It was a cover-your-ass briefing by the Secret Service. The director of the Secret Service needs to go.
Today, a Secret Service spokesman told NBC News a local SWAT team was positioned in the complex where Crooks fired the shots, but not in the same building. Senior law enforcement officials say Crooks was also found with this device, a fireworks detonator. Federal agencies said suspected improvised explosive devices were in his car. The Department of Homeland Security Inspector General now opening an investigation into the agency's handling of Saturday's rally. Among the many unanswered questions, when did law enforcement first see the gun?
Taking a look at the Olympics taking place in France, the Paris mayor swam in the long polluted Seine, fulfilling a promise to show the river was clean enough to host open swimming competitions during the 2024 Olympics. The highly anticipated opening ceremony is set to take place in just 9 days, marking the beginning of an exciting event.
It's the dive into the Seine River that Paris's mayor has been dreaming about, to show the water is clean.
It's amazing. We work a lot and very hard for that. Very lucky and happy day.
Happy because the Seine will be the centerpiece of the Paris Olympics. In less than 2 weeks from now, opening ceremonies will be hosted on the river for the first time. But there had been concerns about athletes competing in the water. The river so polluted, swimming in the Seine was banned for more than a century, with only a few exceptions. Determined to make it safe again for the Olympics, cleanup efforts began over 9 years ago, costing $1.5 billion. It included a giant underground water storage basin, renovating sewer lines and treatment plants. Even with all that, water quality tests last month indicated more needed to be done. It's not the first time a city has pushed preparations for Olympic Games right up to the brink. In Rio, the water quality was also in doubt for boating events, but the issues were resolved just in time. Back in Paris,
we did it.
Officials say the latest water quality tests show welcomed improvements, and Paris is ready to let the Games begin.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was repeatedly heckled and interrupted by opposition lawmakers in the Knesset, who criticized his management of the war in Gaza and demanded he do more to negotiate the release of captives held by Hamas.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faced heated opposition in the Knesset on Wednesday from opposition lawmakers. He was repeatedly interrupted and challenged for his management of Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza and over stalled talks aimed at freeing Israelis held hostage by the Palestinian militant group. Netanyahu defended the military's accomplishments, saying he'd defied international pressure to back down before accomplishing his objectives. The Prime Minister faces widespread criticism for security failings ahead of Hamas's surprise attack on October 7th, when gunmen from Gaza rampaged through Israeli towns, killing 1,200 and taking more than 250 hostages, according to Israeli tallies. Israel's devastating retaliation has killed more than 38,000 Palestinians, according to Gaza health officials, and reduced nearly all of the densely populated enclave to rubble. But more than 100 Israelis are believed still held captive in Gaza. Hopes that a proposed ceasefire agreement outlined by U.S. President Joe Biden might bring an end to the fighting and a return of hostages have dwindled, as Israeli and Hamas negotiations, mediated by Egypt and Qatar, drag on. Protests in Israel, sometimes numbering in the tens of thousands, have demanded Netanyahu bring the kidnapped home and resign. The clashes in the country's parliament on Wednesday come ahead of Netanyahu's planned visit to Washington next week, where he is set to address a joint session of the U.S. Congress. Opposition leader Yair Lapid demanded to know whether Netanyahu would use the occasion to announce he'd accepted a hostage deal. If not, Lapid said, don't go to Washington. Go to Qatar or Cairo or stay here and hold discussions around the clock. He added, don't go give a speech in the air conditioning in Washington while the hostages are dying of suffocation in Gaza's tunnels. Netanyahu is scheduled to meet with Biden, who has defended Israel's operation in Gaza and condemned Hamas, but called for greater efforts to relieve the humanitarian crisis and pushed for a ceasefire that would allow more aid and a return of Israeli captives.
Deforestation has dramatically escalated in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, with an UN report warning that vast swaths of virgin forest have been lost in the Virunga National Park, one of the most biodiverse territories on the continent.
Under the once lush slopes of the Nyiragongo volcano in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, traders are hard at work. These chest-high sacks of charcoal in the town of Kibati are the product of deforestation that has, according to the United Nations, reached unprecedented levels. That's amid an ongoing insurgency in North Kivu province by the M23 rebel group. The violence has displaced over 1.7 million people. The insecurity has worsened pressure on the region's once densely forested hillsides and the Virunga National Park, home to many of the world's last mountain gorillas. Each morning in Kibati, crowds of locals and displaced people enter the park's territory in search of logs to burn to make charcoal. Others go deeper to cut trees for planks or plant crops in newly open land. And that's all happening in a park that is one of the most biodiverse territories on the continent, home to 3 types of great ape, bush elephants, and the endangered okapi, nicknamed Africa's unicorn. In 2021, authorities declared martial law in Congo's east in response to the rising violence. According to a UN report, armed actors on both sides have profited off the production or trade in wooden planks in the areas they control. Illegal and uncontrolled logging, the July 8th report said, has led to the destruction of significant swathes of virgin forest in protected areas of Virunga. And here's what that looks like in satellite images taken between August 2022 and June 2024. Data from Global Forest Watch, an initiative that uses satellites to track deforestation, showed that annual tree cover loss in Virunga rose over 22% to 16,813 acres in 2021. A further 17,928 acres were lost in 2022. At a roadside depot in Kibati, planks, some of which have come from trees in Virunga, are unloaded off the back of motorbikes.
In Ukraine, a handful of startups are developing artificial intelligence systems to help fly a vast fleet of drones, taking warfare into uncharted territory as combatants race to gain a technological edge in battle. AI enables UAV swarming, target identification and terrain mapping, aiming to bolster combat effectiveness and counter technological challenges on the front lines.
Swarmer, a Ukrainian tech firm, is pioneering drone technology with its TIC system, which coordinates a network of drones for reconnaissance and strikes. The CEO of the company highlights the inefficiencies of human-piloted operations, advocating for AI to manage swarms up to 20 drones effectively. This innovation is part of Ukraine's response to the Russian invasion, leveraging AI to protect pilots and enhance operational scale amidst electronic warfare challenges. Despite ethical concerns, AI-driven drones are already improving strike accuracy and operational autonomy in Ukraine's defense strategy.
Let's go in for a short commercial break. More world news right after this. Welcome back. Over 50 members of the uncontacted Mashco-Piro tribe were sighted on a riverbank in Peru's remote Amazon, near areas where logging concessions have been granted. Another group of 17 appeared near a neighboring village, sparking concerns amid ongoing encroachment.
Rare images of members of uncontacted indigenous tribe in the Peruvian Amazon forest were published on Tuesday. The images show dozens of Mashco-Piro people on the banks of a river close to logging sites. Survival International said that the photographs were taken at the end of June on the riverbanks of the Madre de Dios region in the southeast Peru near the border with Brazil. Several logging companies hold timber concessions in the area, and one company, Canales Tahuamanu, has reportedly built over 200 kilometers of roads for logging operations. Local indigenous rights group FENAMAD said that the reclusive Mashco-Piro tribe, one of the world's most hidden, has been sighted coming out of the rainforest more often to relocate further away from loggers and find food.
And with that, we mark the end of today's bulletin. We will see you again next time, the latest happenings across the globe. Stay tuned as Sina Mayadunne will join you next with the Nightly Business Report. Thank you for watching. Good night.